There are channels in which lies are told, and there are channels in which facts are told, and people who want the lies, they don't come here. They go to a different channel. There's a lot of talk about Biden's son, that Biden stopped the prosecution, and a lot of people want to find out about that, so whatever you can do with the Attorney General would be great. He seems to be suggesting that Vice President Biden stopped the prosecution of his son Hunter, and that's just not true at all.
Oh, son of a bitch. Got fired.
This is CNN, home of fake news.
To this day, there is no evidence of any criminal wrongdoing by Hunter Biden, or his father Joe, for that matter. And people who want the lies, they don't come here.
The Biden family, in fact, was influence peddling. Now, did Joe Biden commit the Foreign Agents Registration Act because his family was receiving millions and millions of dollars from these foreign nationals?
If we had presented this in court, it's an open and shut case. The only thing making this amorphous, the only thing making this anything less than crystal clear is the person in the White House and all of his henchmen, because we all see this for what it is, which is the use of leverage of a vice presidential father and then some for massive monetary gain.
To this day, there is no evidence of any criminal wrongdoing by Hunter Biden, or his father Joe, for that matter.
Well, thanks to the House Oversight Committee, we know a lot of stuff about the Bidens and the money. $3 million, at least, from China to various Biden family members and associates. $17 million from Ukraine, from Romania. Did you know about Romania? At least $1 million from various oligarchs, government officials to Biden family members and associates. It is so strange.
Now, why, if his name had been Hunter Jordan or Hunter Smith, he wouldn't have made a dime. The fact is he was playing off of his father, and we now know, despite Joe Biden's lies, that in fact Biden was part of the game.
We now know that Joe Biden has been lying about knowing his son's business activities. He lied during the 2020 debates.
Joe Biden lied on the debate stage. He said there's nothing happening. I don't make money from Ukraine. You do.
Then former Vice President Biden, before he becomes president, on the debate stage with Trump, twice said, to Shannon's point, you know, we got no money from China. We meaning his son, not directly talking about himself.
My son has not made money in terms of this thing about, what are you talking about, China. I have not had, the only guy made money from China is this guy.
But think about all of the things that we have learned since initially when the president was saying, my son never made money out of anything in China. We know that's not true.
But Washington Post Glenn Kessler, I always say he's sleeping because he doesn't often fact check Democrats. Well, he woke up and he said Biden said his son earned no money from China. His son says otherwise. Now, never mind that headline. If it would have been Trump lies. But regardless, he gives Joe Biden 4 Pinocchios for that statement.
3 years later.
With regard to Ukraine, I carried out U.S. policy. Not one single solitary thing was out of line. Not a single thing.
More credible allegations that Joe and Hunter Biden were selling Joe's power to corrupt, nefarious, and even adversarial powers all around the globe.
Every day we get more and more evidence that points to Joe Biden directly. All roads lead to Joe Biden, and today we learned without a shadow of a doubt that Joe Biden has been lying to the American people when he said he never spoke with anyone his son was receiving money from.
I've never discussed my business or their business, my sons or daughters. I never discussed a single thing with my son about anything having to do with Ukraine.
How many times have you ever spoken to your son about his overseas business dealings?
I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings.
That Joe Biden did, in fact, talk to numerous people that his son was receiving wires from while Joe Biden was vice president.
I have never discussed with my son or my brother or anyone else anything having to do with their businesses, period.
And that is something that Joe Biden has consistently lied about. But yet we learned today that over 20 times, in fact, Joe Biden, while he was vice president, spoke with people who were sending the Biden family members these suspicious wires that the banks nor anyone else in America know what the purpose of the wires were for.
The biggest political scandal this country has ever seen. It's not even close.
As soon as he became vice president, Burisma, not the best reputation in the world.
The people that Hunter Biden was putting on speakerphone with his sitting vice president father were some of the worst people on the planet. But yet they were paying the Biden family millions and millions of dollars.
I hear they paid him $183,000, and they gave him a $3 million upfront payment.
All right.
And he had no energy.
I'm going to let the vice president
That's
respond to that quickly,
100%
and then I need to get
dishonest.
to a question to you. Very
No
quickly,
basis for
Mr.
that. Everybody investigated that. No one said anything he did was wrong in Ukraine.
There's now no way to deny the very obvious. Even the most spineless rhino in the Republican House cannot, in good conscience, ignore this much evidence of corruption from the sitting president of the United States. Not to mention all the lies.
There is no evidence of any criminal wrongdoing by Hunter Biden or his father Joe, for that matter.
This is more evidence that points directly to Joe Biden. I mean, the number of crimes that the Biden family's committed continues to grow.
Vice President Biden was carrying out Obama administration policy to push for Victor Shokin to be fired. And that policy had the support of the international communities.
And that's what Devin Archer said that those guys were pressuring Hunter to do. Call Washington, get this Shokin fired. I mean, this was a bombshell today, and more evidence shows that Joe Biden knew exactly what was going on.
Of course, the president lied about a lot of things this year, not just the Ukraine scandal. Here's one of his most infamous about the hurricane that he said was barreling down on Alabama. He tweeted back in September, Alabama will most likely be hit much harder than anticipated. Was Alabama in the path of Hurricane Dorian? No.
The fake news media was fixated on the fact that I properly said at the beginnings of Hurricane Dorian that in addition to Florida and other states, Alabama may also be grazed or hit. They went crazy, hoping against hope that I made a mistake, which I didn't. Check out the maps. He goes on to say that the lamestream media and their Democratic partner should start playing it straight.
Was Alabama in the path of Hurricane Dorian? No.
The storm was originally projected to head straight through Florida, the chart showing it could possibly reach the Gulf and Alabama.
Was Alabama in the path of Hurricane Dorian? No.
Hurricane Dorian was originally forecasted to have an impact on Alabama.
But there are many states that are under threat right now, Derek.
At least 6, from the Carolinas right through Georgia coastline into Florida, certainly, and then also even into the Gulf of Mexico, Louisiana, Alabama.
Was Alabama in the path of Hurricane Dorian?
Mexico, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi.
No. Another unarmed black man shot. Disturbing video last night showed Jacob Blake, unarmed, being shot by police. A black man, father of 3, shot in the back at close range in front of his 3 children. He was unarmed.
During the investigation following the initial incident, Mr. Blake admitted that he had a knife in his possession, and DCI agents, that's the Division of Criminal Investigation, recovered a knife from the driver's side floorboard of Mr. Blake's vehicle.
Jacob Blake, the unarmed black man, a man who appears to be completely unarmed.
They say that Mr. Blake was not unarmed, that he had a knife in his possession.
Shooting of Jacob Blake, unarmed, a black man. Once again, an unarmed black man is shot.
I'm rattled. You know, I realized I had dropped my knife. I had a little pocket knife.
We all saw it. A man who appears to be completely unarmed. A man who appears to be completely unarmed.
I realized I had dropped my knife. I had a little pocket knife.
So what happened to that campaign promise that he would protect the LGBT community? The president even used the term LGBTQ at the Republican convention, the first time a nominee ever did that. But I guess actions speak louder than those 5 letters.
2 years into President Trump's term, it is hard to find evidence that he's making good on some really big promises.
Candidate Donald Trump was quick to promise his advocacy for the LGBTQ community.
As your president, I will do everything in my power to protect our LGBTQ citizens. Believe me.
As your president, I will do everything in my power to protect our LGBTQ citizens from the violence and oppression of a hateful foreign ideology. Believe me.
And people who want the lies, they don't come here.
Look at our committee. I'm on the Oversight Committee. We probably deal with more whistleblowers than any committee in Congress. Two things you look at to determine the credibility of a so-called whistleblower when they're coming forward. First, did they have firsthand knowledge? And second, what is their motivation? Was there some kind of bias? This individual has problems on both of those counts. He had no firsthand knowledge. He heard something from someone who may have heard something from someone.
No, his sources were firsthand sources.
So he has no firsthand knowledge.
You know as well as I do that you do not need to have firsthand knowledge to be a whistleblower.
They're called qui tam cases, which is a Latin term which basically means he who brings the case for the king and himself. Now, in order to be a whistleblower under the qui tam statute, you have to have some firsthand knowledge about what's actually occurring in this corruption.
It has never been true. It has never been true that you need to have firsthand knowledge to be a whistleblower.
But it's something that's critical when you're assessing if they're credible.
Now, in order to be a whistleblower, you have to have some firsthand knowledge about what's actually occurring.
My guess is, if you ask the American people, when they look at what happened with Joe Biden's son, I don't know that.
What happened with Joe Biden's son?
He got paid $50,000, Jake. $50,000 a month for several years now.
And the Ukrainian prosecutor said there's no evidence of wrongdoing. And the Ukrainian prosecutor said there's no evidence of wrongdoing.
Look, what we know from the FBI's confidential human source is that they wanted Mr. Shokin fired because if Burisma was under investigation in Ukraine, it was going to make it hard for them to be able to get an oil and gas lease in the United States and raise capital in the United States. Yeah. We know this. We know that Joe Biden bragged about getting the prosecutor fired.
I said, you're not getting the billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired.
We're pursuing Ukraine to replace a weak prosecutor who wouldn't do his job.
And then when the company that's paying him that money is under investigation, guess what? Daddy comes running to the rescue. The Vice President of the United States comes running
That's not what happened.
Fire that prosecutor.
Sir, that's not what happened. The European Union, the Obama administration, the International Monetary Fund, clean government activists in Ukraine thought that the prosecutor was not prosecuting corruption.
You're saying Joe Biden didn't tell Ukraine to fire that prosecutor? I think he did.
He did.
No,
but
he bragged about it.
The guy was not prosecuting anything.
That Burisma, the corrupt Ukrainian energy company that paid him millions, called Washington, D.C. to get the prosecutor Viktor Shokin fired.
Burisma was worried that people would legally mess with them, those people being Viktor Shokin, the prosecutor. So who could they get? Joe Biden. Joe Biden could get in there and prevent them from legally messing. The one person who could cause Burisma problems, that guy is gone. Lo and behold, Burisma is not under the problems that they originally were before Viktor Shokin was fired. You have all the connections. Now Congress needs to
And that was the problem. The government of the United States and the West.
Joe Biden told him to fire the prosecutor.
You're not saying facts. You say, here are the facts.
No, here are the facts. Did Joe Biden tell him to fire the prosecutor?
Because he wasn't going after corruption. He wasn't going after corruption.
The Ukrainian energy firm faced an investigation from prosecutors in Kyiv as Vice President Mr. Biden threatened to withhold $1 billion in aid to Ukraine unless prosecutor Viktor Shokin was fired.
Oh, son of a bitch. Got fired.
This was at the time that Hunter Biden was on Burisma's board. Archer said that if the Biden name was involved, people would be intimidated to mess with Burisma.
Do you understand what I'm saying? He wasn't going after corruption.
Was that prosecutor looking into Burisma, the company that had hired Joe Biden's son for $50,000?
According to the Ukrainians, that investigation was dormant at the time.
Most important,
that investigation was dormant at the time.
Did Joe Biden's son get paid $50,000 a month in a field in an industry that he had no experience in? Those are three key facts.
Devin Archer testified that the owners of Burisma were pressuring Hunter to call Washington to get Shokin, the Ukrainian prosecutor, fired. And we know because we've seen on video Joe Biden bragged about, in fact, firing the prosecutor in Ukraine that was investigating his son's corrupt energy company.
Oh, son of a bitch. Got fired.
And he wasn't going to give them our tax dollars, our foreign aid, unless the Ukrainian president fired the prosecutor.
I'm just telling you what happened.
I think that you came here and leveled a bunch of accusations and allegations about Hunter Biden.
I didn't level. I just said the facts. Did he get paid $50,000 a month?
He was paid by a foreign company. Yeah, he was paid by Burisma. But Joe Biden was trying to get a prosecutor who was not pursuing corruption fired, and it was supported.
It's amazing the gymnastics you guys will go through to defend what. Do you really think the vice president?
This stinks to high heaven. It is public corruption. Hunter Biden is the bag man, and Joe Biden is the influence peddler, pure and simple.
And speaking specifically to the allegation about the Victor Shokin firing, Oversight has stated, you even put it on your Twitter today, that today Devin Archer said that the Burisma heads called D.C. to make sure that Shokin got fired. Was that testified today? That's accurate, right?
That is accurate. They wanted to make sure that the thing that they paid for actually happened. That is correct.
And I would think somebody who's been accused of things in the last year or two would be more sensitive about throwing out wild allegations against people.
I'm not throwing out wild. I'm throwing out the facts.
The prosecutor was not pursuing corruption. That's why the entire West wanted him fired, including anti-corruption activists in Ukraine.
Where Hunter Biden and Devin Archer are meeting with the executives from Burisma, the guys who run Burisma, Mr. Zolochevsky. They're meeting with them, and at this meeting they say, the Burisma people say, we're under a lot of pressure. We need the United States government to help us out. And of course, 5 days after this meeting, December 9th, 2015, Joe Biden goes to Ukraine and starts attacking the prosecutor.
I don't understand what you don't get about that.
I get that. I'm just talking about this specific case that there's been reporting on, and the facts of that specific case are what he was paid per month, $50,000. Like I said, that's more than some of the folks I get the privilege of representing in the 4th District of Ohio get paid in a year. Again, 5 days after this, Joe Biden takes action, which is the start of this process that now has become somewhat well known, where Joe Biden a few months later says, where he gives this talk to the folks in Ukraine, says, if you don't fire Shokin, the prosecutor, you're not getting the money. None of that.
I understand you want to change the subject, but the president was pushing the president of Ukraine to investigate a political rival. I cannot believe that that is okay with you. I can't believe it's okay with you.
Right. And Trump's whole phone call was, you know, you've got to get rid of the corruption in Ukraine. And now everything that's coming out about Biden shows just how heavy and thick the corruption was. I mean, Trump was completely right. Yeah. They tried to impeach him for it, and he was completely right.
The president was pushing the president of Ukraine to investigate a political rival. I cannot believe that that is okay with you.
I mean, Trump was completely right. Yeah. They tried to impeach him for it, and he was completely right.
Exactly the case. And they've been after President Trump since he came down the escalator. Here we are, what now, 7, 8 years later, and it continues nonstop. Vice President,
and I would think somebody who's been accused of things in the last year or two would be more sensitive about throwing out wild allegations against people.
I'm not throwing out wild. I'm throwing out the facts.
The prosecutor was not pursuing corruption. That's why the entire West wanted him fired, including anti-corruption activists in Ukraine. I don't understand what you don't get about that.
For the American people, we have never had a president compromised like this in the history of our country. His family has made at least $30 million, if not more, based purely on the access that Joe Biden has had at the top of our politics for almost 50 years. And every time you turn over a new stone, what is revealed is more of the same. Hunter Biden was in the country, Joe Biden was in the same country. A week later, a month later, Hunter Biden's getting paid. Then there are wire transfers going to all these accounts, and all of the different members of the family are getting money. This is corruption, pure and simple.
Yeah. Congressman Jordan, you did a disservice to them. And more importantly, you did a disservice to the American people, and you did a disservice to the truth.
What?
Congressman Jordan, you owe them, and anyone else whose comments you completely misrepresented today on Capitol Hill, you owe them an apology.
What?
Any person of honor, any person who cares about the truth would do that. I guess we'll see what you're going to do. There are channels in which lies are told, and there are channels in which facts are told, and people who want the lies, they don't come here. They go to a different channel.
The heavy-duty bribery stuff, the allegations were 2014 and 2015. I mean, what was the business? What was the brand? What exactly did the Biden family do? What product did they create? This wasn't exactly Andrew Mellon and Andrew Carnegie in the 20s inventing steel mills or Henry Ford inventing cars. What did the Bidens do? The guy's in office for 50 years. He walks out and buys himself huge mansions in Rehoboth Beach and Wilmington, Delaware. We have pictures of it up on the full screen. You may not be able to see it. What did he do for this money, Jim Jordan?
Yeah, it's access. And the Democrats tried to say yesterday it's this, quote, illusion of access. Well, there was no illusion about Joe Biden 5 days after this meeting in Dubai, then going to Ukraine and talking about the prosecutor's office and what's going wrong there and how it has to change. And then a few months later, they fire the prosecutor. That's not an allusion to access. That is just access, and that is just action. That's what it appears to be. And again, the timing, I think, of that is pretty suspicious.
I don't understand what you don't get about that.
That's the kind of testimony we got yesterday. The brand, of course, is Joe Biden. Devin Archer was clear about that. The Biden brand was Joe Biden, the guy who has the influence in D.C., the place they called during this meeting in Dubai.
I am your voice.
I mean, Trump was completely right.
Yeah.